Okay, you may proceed.
May it please the Court. My name is Clyde Collins. I'm appellate counsel for Ed Downing. There are 6 issues on appeal. Absent questions from the Court, I'll only address the first 4. That Senior Judge Watson erred in finding the family residence to be a marital asset when Ed Downing purchased a lot, constructed a home, built a dock, and improved the property prior to the marriage. Number 2, that he erred in awarding the former husband's equity in the family residence to the former wife as lump sum alimony instead of exclusive use and possession when she was also awarded permanent periodic alimony. Number 3, that Senior Judge Watson erred in imputing income of $5,000 a month. And 4, that his failure to include relevant economic factors to justify the award of permanent periodic alimony was reversible error. This is a case that at the end of the day, one party is a millionaire and the other is a pauper. And I think it cries for review and for reversal. A brief statement of...
Well, doesn't that statement not help your case? I mean, we have a woman who has 6 children, never worked out of a home. From the record, it appears was dutiful, and does not have income separate from her husband. At this point, does not have a skill, and monetary funds were made available to improve the house, refinance the house, etc. Doesn't that go against your first statement that it's about a millionaire a pauper?
No, the husband is a pauper now, and during the course of the marriage, we're
pauper.
Yes, sir.
Right. How can we know that? I mean,
the house
that could be true, I guess, but
I know the record demonstrates it.
Well, the record doesn't demonstrate the value of the business that your client got sole ownership of. It could be worth nothing. It could be worth $10 million. I have no idea. So, I mean, I don't really know from the record what the state of the party's financial situation is.
Agreed, and that is one reason why this trial, why this judgment, final judgment, needs reversal amendment. Senior Judge Watson did not conduct a full and meaningful review of the party's assets. He did not make findings sufficient. As you say, we have no clue what the value of the business is, but what we do know is the house was pretty much paid off. It was, by the parties' agreement, the parties was worth $850,000. That is what we do know.
Well, don't we know that your client had to have some type of income to maintain the lifestyle that he had, including traveling, supporting the house, building a boat dock, the type of money he agreed to pay his wife, and then support himself? If you do a net worth analysis, just to pay the bills that he was paying, he had to make more than what he alleged the business was paying.
A review of the facts, as we have set forth, states as follows. 1, she claimed from the get-go, from the very beginning, that she needed $10,000 a month. The parties agreed prior to the final judgment of a sum that was around a little over $5,000 a month. And that was successful to maintain the household and to take care of the children. And she admitted in her testimony that she had no problem with that amount. However, then we go into prior to the final judgment, the parties agreed to certain aspects. She would keep her car, he would keep his truck. There was a lien on his truck, mind you. He kept his business. There was no evaluation as to the value of the business. It could be like a single lawyer who, once that lawyer stops billing, the business is worth $0. But we don't know that. But what we do know is that there are only 2 witnesses at the trial. The wife, who by her own admission never kept any of the finances of the parties, did not pay any of the bills, did not do any of the reconstruction of the house. She just gave these wild estimates of what improvements had been made, with which he disagreed, respectfully. She goes on.
Your client's tax returns in the court record?
The tax returns are in the record, and he did state that his income was for between 2002 and 2005 between $50,000 and $59,000. He also stated that he sold $130,000 worth of stock.
Well, that was my next question. Was that reflected in the tax returns he provided to the court?
No, it was not. And so he may have some tax return problems. But that's not an issue here. The issue here today is whether or not there were sufficient findings by this senior judge. And I would suggest that they do not. I would suggest that he was so prejudiced by this allegation of adultery, which he, when the objection was made, he agreed with the objection, however allowed the wife to introduce it, provided she tied it in. She never tied it in, and then the final judgment that was done 2 months after the hearing, he criticizes the husband for adultery. He criticizes the husband for alcoholism. There's no evidence of that. The judge makes his own findings as to the value of the real estate. There's no reason why this could not be an exclusive use and possession case. But the trial court makes no findings why it should not be, does not review it in any way whatsoever. To the contrary, when the judge made a proposal, which, by all accounts, he admitted in his final judgment, if the husband will come up with $100,000, things will go well. What was that $100,000 for? It was for the children's health and then surgery for the child. Well, Children's Healthy Kids takes care of that, for which we're grateful. Well, it goes to repairs for the house. There's no documents as to the repairs needed. Just an estimate by the wife, who has no training or skilled in estimates. Attorney's fees, well, that was to be reserved, so she didn't really need that until later. Her health problems, maybe, but that didn't cover for $100. When the husband refused the judge's offer, the judge responded by awarding the former wife the entire asset of the partners, the marital, without any discussion why it's not exclusive use and possession. I see the court is prepared, so I've kind of deviated from my arguments as to both the marital asset, number one. And
let me ask you about your issue on the marital asset. From my review of the record, it appears that the husband testified that he paid cash for the lot.
Yes, sir.
But then it appears clear that he financed the home and the dock, because he says he later refinanced everything. And you can't refinance unless you finance it in the beginning. So and they were married shortly after the home was completed, and not that long after the purchase. So it looks like the home was paid for by marital proceeds, his salary during the marriage, for the most part. There may have been a little bit, mostly interest, but it was paid before the marriage. And then he testified that in 1991 he refinanced the entire thing. He doesn't testify to the amount he refinanced, but if you sort of look at the payment amount, the duration of the loan, and sort of do a little math, you have to guess as to the interest rate, but it appears to me from that testimony that he refinanced everything so that everything would have been then paid again during the course of the marriage. Why wouldn't that make it a marital asset? In other words, if he paid a little bit before the marriage on his own that would have otherwise made it not a marital asset, but then he refinanced the whole thing so that it was paid for again out of marital funds, why wouldn't that make it a marital asset?
Well, certainly you have reviewed the record, and that is correct. I think the parties evaluated it at $280,000 prior to the time it became a marital asset. And he did refinance it during the course of the marriage. As to the amount, the record is silent.
But it does reflect the duration of the loan, and it does reflect the payments, so you can sort of get a feel for the amount of the...
But it was designed so that it would be paid off so he could enjoy the benefit of the house.
But you understand the question, I mean, legally, if say he spent $75,000 in cash before the marriage, but then he borrowed the whole amount again, so that the house was paid for again during the course of the marriage, wouldn't that make that a marital asset?
Indeed.
Okay. So that would...
But why wasn't that identified by the judge? And why didn't he specify as to the amount that should have been carved out prior to it becoming a marital asset? And he didn't. In fact, just the senior Judge Watson, after tendering that offer of $100,000 that was rejected, slams him by awarding him the entire house. So that's why I'm saying that the final judgment cries to be reversed and remanded with instructions for those kinds of findings, Your Honor. And in the absence of that, you do have one party as a pauper, one party is homeless. One party does not have a home in which to visit with his children. And is that the kind of final judgment you want to see in this district, which I suggest you do not? The final judgment does not have a clear identification of the other elementary statute elements as required under the statute. It doesn't do that. And the question is, why not? Well, I know why not. It's evident in the final judgment.
Well,
the judge asked him to agree to $100,000. When he refused, he said, okay, I got you. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
It's helpful when we review final judgments where they list the statutory factors and then go through them one by one. I mean, that certainly is helpful in our review. But in this case, looking at the statutory factors and looking at the judge's order, it does appear to me that he looks at the age of the parties, the earning ability of the parties. He looks at he goes through a number of facts and makes a number of fact findings, and it appears that he's considered everything. I mean, I can't identify anything in the statute that he hasn't addressed in the order. At some point in the order, are you suggesting that it has to be sort of formed out?
Well, generally, I think that the format of having each element spelled out is a benefit to the appellate court. And certainly, I don't think that he complies with the statute. I mean, Judge Thompson said that the record reflects the lady was not employed during the marriage, but she admitted she was. She had a part-time job after the third child. I mean, this is a case that's a sloppy job. I'm appellate counsel now, but it is a sloppy job below. But notwithstanding that, this court should not allow a senior judge to do a sloppy job too. And that's what we have here. We have a sloppy job here regarding the marital.
Well, how do you expect, I mean, what should we expect of a trial? If both parties present evidence to the extent that they did, and they present evidence that allows a judge to make some discretionary decisions, but not to be precise in terms, I mean, I can't look at the record and tell, it appears to me that the house ought to be completely a marital asset because of the refinancing, but, maybe there's some portion that should have been designated as his non-marital asset.
Right.
But, I mean, that's the case that the parties tried. That's the case that your client and his trial counsel tried. How can we expect a judge to get more precise in ruling when the evidence presented doesn't allow that kind of precision?
Well,
should we send all cases back where the parties just didn't do the job that allows the kind of precision that I would rather see in a final judgment?
When you have a senior judge that makes...
I don't think it matters whether it's a senior judge or not.
I think when you have a judge who makes a ruling like this, that is sloppy and not following the law, then yes, you have an obligation to. I think when you have a judge that makes an offer, he was good enough to put it in the final judgment. Hey, make an offer of $100,000. Why $100,000? What was it based on? Was it based on need for children's surgery? Well, that was not necessary because of the enrollment in the Children's Healthy Kids. Was it necessary for repairs of the house? Well, there was no evidence, no receipts, no estimates whatsoever of the repairs necessary. He said he couldn't afford it.
But didn't your client testify that there are repairs that are necessary, and I'm willing to? I mean,
I don't think he said that they were. It's once again not trial counsel, but appellate counsel. I think the record is very skippy on that and sloppy on that. I mean, is the wife, by all accounts, worked here and there? Is she a contractor? No. Has she worked in the business? No. The testimony was that the husband did most of the repairs himself. So, I mean, but what does that say in the need by the trial judge for $100,000? And then when you don't agree to it, to slam you by saying, okay, not only do I decide that the house is a marital asset, but I'm going to give your wife lump sum alimony, which is designed in the statute for extraordinary cases. What is the need for lump sum alimony here when she also has permanent alimony of $2,000? Why should, in all accounts, the husband be made a pauper at the end of the day?
It's a matter of law with the fact that she has 6 children that she's responsible for, and if something were to happen to him, she and the kids would be out on the street because he is a sole source of income. He outlines those circumstances in the order. Isn't that the kind of circumstance that would justify a lump sum alimony award, and why?
He did not outline that in the final judgment. There is a $500,000 insurance policy out there that's part of the agreement of the parties. My client's paying for. There's been no issue as to the necessity for lump sum. He regularly paid the bills. He hasn't been able to lately because of the high number, but he regularly paid the bills. So, and the order is incomplete. And yes, Judge Saya, I think you have to reverse judges that are final judgments that are sloppy like this, whether it's a senior judge or whether it's a brand new judge. In the absence of clear findings by the judge, how is a party to know whether or not justice has been reached? I think that the last thing that concerns me is that and very quickly before my time is up, and absent any questions of the court.
If you want to reserve 5 minutes, but you can
Let me
go as
just make
long as
one
you
point.
want to
I'll
go.
reserve 4.
That's up to you.
Is the issue regarding the real estate. My client said, the husband said, hey, I need a house. I'd like to visit the kids too. Wife needs a house. We can sell the house. There's no testimony by any realtors, no appraisals. But the judge just on his own accord just makes a finding, assuming the parties could sell the home for $850, which the court doubts, needed repairs. The wife would have less than $400,000 to purchase another home. There's no testimony that she couldn't find another home that was in good condition for these kids, of which one child, I think is 18, is going to move on to college. So it's less than 6 kids. Anyway, I'm over my time. I'll reserve for any questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Linda Bryan, and I'm here on behalf of the appellee, MILA DOWNEY. And I believe we've already gotten to the issues, so I will pick up there, notwithstanding questions that you might have. First thing I do want to establish is that this is a factually based case. The finding of the facts were up to this trier of fact. This, as has been described, long-term experienced judge, I prefer. And credibility also was an issue, and he being the judge, the trial court, had to decide, whom he believed. It appears apparent, or it is apparent to myself, that this judge used the facts provided by the parties, many of which were not contested, and formulated a tremendous judgment. True, he did not take the statute and go down A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but as this court has pointed out, every single one of the relevant factors exists in this judgment. We have an appellant who's complaining.
Yes, what findings of fact in the judgment justify a lump sum alimony award of the husband's interest in the $800,000 marital home?
This judge was aware that essentially this marriage that had produced 6 children, all who were minors at the time of the judgment, had 2 assets. Had this home, which the parties valued at $850,000, and had the Vertex Industries, the business that the husband operated.
Isn't it a problem that the company is not valued at all? I mean, it could be worth nothing. It could it could have a negative.
I believe that, and I'm not justifying the fact that nobody brought in an actual value, but I believe there's sufficient evidence in this record to make a meaningful review here, because what we do have is we have a business through the husband's, efforts that is grossing him at least $111,000 a year. So it has value. And, just based on common sense, if you were to cap that rate for a sale, I doubt he'd sell that business less than 3 or 5 times cap rate at what it can make for him, a year. That's not in the evidence you have to extrapolate, but it is earning him $111,000 plus a year. And it is supporting this lifestyle. And in fact, the testimony is it's the only support of this lifestyle. So he's not a pauper. He has the keys to that business. He has the ability to make the money he needs to survive and to support his family. And then we have the house. We have 6 children, 6 minor children. We have a wife that's been pointed out, getting to the facts of the lump sum, who has no income, has no real skills. Oh, yes, we have the work outside the home from the record on page 108 of the transcript found at record 489. We had an employee that worked at this furniture business. We actually had 2 women that worked there, and I was pregnant with Keegan. So I'd go in part-time I did have someone who watched my 3 daughters, but she just couldn't take it anymore with 3 kids. She was at her wit's end, so I had to come home. I'd only go in maybe a couple hours a day to straighten up and that kind of thing. That's hardly work experience, and I think this trial court correctly found that this woman did not work outside this home. She had $175 in her checking account. Now,
I don't think appellant is contesting the award of alimony or the trial court's determination that alimony was appropriate in this upper end gray marriage case. The question is whether there is support in the final judgment for a lump sum award of the only asset valued in the record.
right, because the parties had stipulated as to the business and that he could have it. Okay, getting to it. We have 6 children. We have the stability of those children. We have, and appellant contends it's a slam dunk of some description. We have a situation where there are immediate needs of this family, none of which, by the way, are the surgery for this child, the testicular surgery that was paid for by Kids Bridge Insurance. And the court doesn't even list it in its findings. But the court lists about $92,000 worth of repairs to the home, orthodontic needs of the children, surgery for the wife, and different things. And basically, and I quoted it in my brief, he says, you know, the husband testified, do you have the money for these expenses? No. He didn't say, oh, those expenses are not valid. She doesn't know what she's talking about. No, I don't have the money. So the court says to him, or says to him through its attorney, look, you know, are you willing to help out here? You know, we could mortgage this home. Are you willing to do this? I believe the court felt like he couldn't force him to do it. And the husband's reaction, I think, was very telling. Well, no, that's not convenient. I don't want to mortgage this home. So here's this court really left with little or no choice. This wife has nothing, and she has 6 children. The stability of the children, him being the only income earner, him having total control of that business, I believe this is, if there is a textbook case for lump sum, I believe this is it. And the court also found, and I don't know why this is totally commensurate with the record, he found that if she had to resell the house, that she could hardly make enough to rehouse these children in the market. He said she'd come out with about, if they split it, she'd come out with about $400,000. Well, how did he get there? He cut $850 in half and took off realtors' commissions, which are commonly known to be 6 to 10%, title insurance, and dock stamps, and said, here you go, you know, based on his understanding of the market in that area. I believe that he felt like he had to give this woman a chance to support these children. She is not going to be in the workforce. She had a 6-year-old at the time of the judgment. The oldest was 16 at the time of the judgment. She is not going to be back in the workforce for over 10 years, if at all. So I believe those are the facts, and they're in the judgment. All focused on the stability of the 6 kids that justify the lump sum, and yes, the husband's reaction to not want to do anything about it.
Wouldn't an award of exclusive use and possession until the kids reach the age of majority have accomplished the same stability for the kids?
How would they have met the needs, if at all, of the $92,000 that is in the record, is testified to, and which does not include vein surgery? How were those going to be addressed? There was mold, there was assessments. In fact, if he says he doesn't have the money and he's not willing to get it, this court was looking for a way to help him get to it. The items which are found in the record.
Mr. Collins has suggested in his argument that the record was insufficient to support those findings because it was just based on the testimony of the wife, and she's not an expert who can opine as to the cost of those things. Was there any objection below to the wife's testimony on those points? Objection, she's not qualified to render that kind of opinion?
There was no objection, and in fact, as I said before, and I quoted it in my brief, I can revisit it, and I cited it to the exact page. When he was confronted, or questioned, I should say, at trial under oath, he being the husband, about whether or not he could afford to pay these expenses, because he heard her testify, his response was, no, but here's what we can do. We can sell the house and split the proceeds and get this stuff paid. So he didn't say it doesn't exist. So he didn't deny, there was no objection. Her testimony is what it is, and the court found, based on her testimony, true, $20,000 for a new roof, new siding approximately $16,000 to $25,000, repair of leaks, doors $2,000, special assessment $3,000, braces for 2 of the girls. She needed a replacement vehicle, $30,000. There's no mention of that other surgery he keeps talking about that was covered when they got the kids' bridge surgery. So this court, yes, used her testimony, and as I said initially, this court apparently and bluntly didn't believe him with respect to some of the issues, and the credibility was up to him. He supposedly sold a lot of stock to support the family, but he didn't report it on his income tax. He reported on his income tax that he made $59,000 a year. However, his expenses totaled almost twice that a year, as was demonstrated in the record. This court has said before, and I quoted or cited, I should say, the cases that, you know, at a minimum, when you're going to challenge the findings of fact, which is basically what we have going on here, you need to move to rehear and ask the trial court to make the findings if you think it's unclear. This court...
Let me ask you this. Assuming that appellant can't really challenge the findings of fact because there was no timely objection below to the testimony that would support those findings in terms of the repairs that were needed and that kind of thing, do you have a case you can point to that would say that under these circumstances where there's a lot of money needed right now to do things that are of immediate importance, and you know the facts found by the trial judge that a lump sum award of alimony in this magnitude would be appropriate?
Well, the closest I could come, and as Your Honors are probably more aware than I am, is that the facts of all these dissolution cases vary. But the closest I could come was the Russell case, Russell versus Russell, which I cited in my brief. And if I can give the exact site, it's in there. But basically, it was a situation where you had parents, and I believe there were 3 children, and you had a husband who made about 3 times what the wife did. Now, the wife in that instance was actually employed outside the home. She had some income, whereas ours doesn't. And $625,000 worth of his equity in the home was awarded to the wife because she testified that in order to continue based on her income and everything, she was going to have to borrow from her parents, and the court said she didn't have to. We don't have a case where anybody had the option of borrowing from parents. But the court said, based on all the foregoing factors, permanent periodic alimony is appropriate. Moreover, lump sum alimony would also be beneficial in providing stability for the wife and the minor children and maintaining the marital residence for the wife and children. Again, it's not your red cow, all fours. It's analogous. I believe that our facts are far more horrendous. You know, we have someone who doesn't work outside the home. This could be her, this is in fact in the eyes of this judge her only security, obviously. At least that's what he found. As far as whether any of this is, and I'm not sure I need to rehash this, but I did want to comment that on the marital asset portion of this argument, that his testimony was that he refinanced it in 1991, a year after the marriage, and the backward math, as Your Honor points out, demonstrates that he refinanced it in its entirety and effectively used marital funds to pay it off over the course of the marriage. We know the statute says it doesn't matter how it's titled, but I think this court's cases and the others say that that is a determinative factor in terms of marital asset. So this court declared it a marital asset, I think, appropriately, and determined that it was the only asset that could provide some type of security for her, and he was even uncertain about that. But I think the flip side of the question is this. If you have exclusive use and possession, you have $92,000 worth of immediate needs, and a husband who says he doesn't have it and is not willing to cooperate with how you get it, the judge wasn't getting back at him. The judge was trapped.
Does the record show if there was any effort made to either sanction the former husband for not completing accurate documents as to finance, or to make him comply with the full disclosure and the financial affidavit of assets or evaluation of the business?
No, there is nothing of that sort in the record. The judge, this is truly not an imputation of income case as the court would normally perceive it to be under or unemployed. This man is literally employed in his own business over which he has control, and he has under-reported his income. The question is how much. And this judge worked at it, I believe, from about 3 different ways. First off, there was the husband's own testimony that it was 40 to 50% a cash business, and he's reporting $59,000 on his taxes. Certain conclusions can be deduced from that. There was also the husband's affidavit and the wife's affidavit, and as I said, he did up through a second amended affidavit, but he never got higher than reporting the $59,000. But the court put the 2 affidavits together as argued in the wife's brief as to the expenses he was paying with his funds, and arrived at the additional sum that way. The court also, and it's cited in the memorandum and cited to the record, the court took the living expenses, his living expenses that were provided by the business, aside from what he's reporting, and totaled those up, $51,000. And as far as this, he doesn't have a home, he's a pauper, this has been this man has never truly lived at home for a very long time. He's been supporting 2 lifestyles for the entire marriage, and he's still supporting 2 lifestyles. The judge did order him to pay this mortgage, which was like $1,300. I think the court found $1,300, rounded it off. The mortgage was paid off last August 06, freeing up $1,300 a month for this gentleman, which he's always paid. And I'm just going to stick my neck out here and say he could probably rent something for that amount per month. You know, not that he doesn't deserve a home, I'm not trying to be mean, but his entire lifestyle has been on the road. And now he after 6 children, he wants to complain that he can't suddenly settle down. I don't believe, with respect to the issues, I think that the case law supports the marital asset. I think the case law, such as it is, supports the award of lump sum, in that I believe the special unique circumstances exist. I think the findings are that the trial court was persuaded by the wife's memorandum and her citation to the record and found the underreported income. I don't think I've heard any lengthy challenge. Oh, let me discuss this about what he's capable of paying. There's a consent order in here, which he values at, I believe, about $5,300. The record facts show that if he pays her $600 a week, plus everything he's always paid before, that consent order is valued at $7,195, and there we have an argumentative dispute. But the point, I believe, is, and the judge made it 2 or 3 times in his final judgment, is, look, he has always paid these expenses. So I'm going to decide what he has based on what I have here, working with what I have. May have more, but I'm going to work with that. I'm going to use the guidelines.
Well, didn't the judge say he's always paid these expenses and had quite a bit of cash left over at the end?
Exactly. And the cash left over thing was, at one point, I think 2003, it got up to $18,000 a year, but the figure that was actually used in the calculations in the memo from the former wife was $10,000 a year to come to that income stream. Conservative. Frankly, I don't think this woman's ever going to get another chance to demonstrate how much he makes. And that could possibly have been another reason why the court said, I'm awarding this home lump sum because this is probably going to be your sole security. Let's see.
You have just a few seconds left.
Any questions, Your Honors?
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you. All right, Mr. Collins, you have exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds, 15, 14.
Thank you.
Counting.
Let me ask you this question.
Yes, sir.
How can you challenge on appeal findings of fact that are based on the wife's testimony if there was no contemporaneous objection? You know, for example, she's not competent to testify as to the value of that repair. I mean, if those objections were not made, how can you challenge the findings that were based on that testimony on appeal?
I think that anyone can render an opinion, and the court can accept the opinion for what it is. But in the concept of the court making a finding of fact, the court did make a finding of fact. For example, on page 6, it goes, the wife's memorandum. Trial counsel for the wife, an experienced marital attorney, probably board certified, doing thousands of divorces. Could have had the business evaluated, could have had a lot of evidence, documents in support of all of this, didn't. The husband's trial counsel, I'm not sure of his experience, but notwithstanding that, I don't think that the final judge makes such a finding that accepts the wife. She just, I mean, in any way.
One of your major complaints is the fact that the final judgment doesn't contain proper findings or complete findings. Did you go back and ask the trial judge to render findings that would be appropriate or move for rehearing?
I did not move for rehearing because I was the appellate counsel, but in the case, the 50th case that's cited by the appellee, it's an experienced trial counsel for which a motion, it can be distinguished from the case at bar. Because in this case of Matthew, they filed for rehearing on 4 of the issues, but not the 5th one regarding attorney's fees.
Why did you bring a complaint to the trial court in any way that you thought the findings were inadequate and to please render an amended judgment that would make appropriate findings?
I did not, and I would suggest, Judge, with a senior judge who's on the bench a fraction of the time, who was 2 months after hearing the argument that he renders a decision, for which you couldn't, in a period of time for rehearing, get the transcript done, much less the trial counsel was devastated by the final judgment. It's unrealistic as a practice of the law to expect a person to do that.
But when the final judgment comes in and you read the final judgment and you determine that the findings are inadequate, you can go back and request follow an appropriate motion, request a hearing, and try and get the transcripts or records prepared before the hearing, and then request an extension on the hearing or continuance if you can't get it.
That is true, but trial counsel did not do that, and I was retained after the time had expired. But I would suggest, Judge, when you have rulings like we do here, where he said, we're not going to talk about him drinking, and then he gets slammed and criticized in the final judgment, what is there to be reheard about?
Well, he wasn't slammed. It was that when he had the children, he couldn't drink before he picked them up or while they were with him.
Oh, but then the judge makes a comment, well, if he didn't drink, he would have more money to spend on the children. That is a comment that is not supported by anything in the record.
Right.
That is a comment in which the judge is imposing his opinion for that of no facts. How do you file for a rehearing on such a comment like that? How do you file for a rehearing on the issue of adultery when he agrees with you?
Let me ask you this. What is it the trial judge, what do you suggest the trial judge should have done if the trial judge is there with a stipulation that the business, that major asset, goes solely to the husband, he has some idea, as Ms. Bryan suggests, about the value of that. I mean, you can take a cap rate, apply it to the excess money that's thrown off of the business and come up with some kind of valuation sort of in your head. I mean, that's reasonable. Why can't the judge, or what do you suggest a judge should do in knowing that that asset's going that way? How should the judge factor that in when dividing the asset that's left?
Well, first of all, he can make a finding that in the absence of such testimony, but he didn't. And in the absence of such a finding by the judge, we have to reverse this final judgment we made.
Okay, your time is exhausted. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to